Okay, so I am now on the domain controller, and I have Mimikatz and the three files that were in the x64 folder of the zip just extracted here to the downloads. And I'm just going to go ahead and go into a command prompt. And something I should point out too, let me bring back up Edge, is if you go up top to the wiki is a great place to learn a lot about Mimikatz and what it's capable of and all the different things that it has here. So please look through the different modules that are available to you and exactly what they're doing. So from here, let's go ahead and I'm going to CD to my downloads folder. And then I'm going to go ahead and execute mimikatz.exe. And it should bring up something that looks just like this. So the first thing that we're going to do, and this is the first step that you should always do, is you should run this. Privilege, and privilege is the module. The first part is the module. And then we're going to use 2 colons, and then we're going to say debug. And we're looking for a privilege 20 OK. Now debug means that it's allowing us to debug a process that we wouldn't otherwise have access to, and this is per the wiki. So we're going to attempt to dump some information out of memory, right? And if we're going to do this, we need to be able to bypass this. So if we don't have the privilege debug on, we're not going to be able to bypass these attacks or the memory protections that are in place, especially for the LSASS, the lsass.exe, which we need to bypass protections on that to be able to dump the LSASS and take the credentials that are stored there. So we're going to run a few attacks against this. So the first attack I'm going to show you is a very common attack. So we're going to type in SEKURLSA, and then we're going to do 2 colons here, and we're going to type in logon passwords. Now for this one, I want you to imagine that not only are we compromising the domain controller here, and I'm going to scroll up just a bit, but imagine that maybe we just compromised a regular computer. Now, the logon passwords, when we dump this for a regular computer, are going to show us the computer. You see the computer username and the NTLM hash for that, as well as any user that has logged in since the last reboot, and that's stored here in memory. All right. So we're taking advantage of this stored in memory. And say, for example, you saw earlier with Man in the Middle 6 where we actually used a computer to pull down information. Well, it's possible that we have misconfiguration in our environment where a computer is capable of logging into the domain controller and running exploits. So it's always good to check this hash, and this hash is NTLM, not NTLM v2. So we can pass this hash around and try to utilize it in attacks. So this would be taking advantage of Mimikatz pass the hash feature. So keep that in mind here. The other thing that we're looking for is accounts that have logged in. So let's scroll down until we find the administrator. So the administrator is the only account I've logged in with on this domain controller. And we also pull down the administrator's hash. So if there was a machine where, say for example, a domain admin had logged into, and it doesn't have to be the domain controller, but that domain admin had logged into, then we can possibly get their hash and use that to pass around. And potentially, we could take advantage of this wdigest here. So what is the wdigest? Well, it is a feature that on Windows 7 and before was enabled by default. And what it did was it stored your password in clear text. Thank you, Windows. From Windows 10 on, they have patched it, or Windows 8 on, they have patched this. And what that means is they just turned it off. The feature still exists. So what can we do? We could actually turn on wdigest with Mimikatz, and then we can go ahead and wait for somebody to log onto the computer. So it does require somebody to log off or log out and then log into the computer. But if we're patient or we're waiting through something for a couple days, this isn't a bad idea to turn on wdigest because that's a registry feature. So even if they reboot the computer, it's still going to come back on. We go in there, we wait, we find the clear text password, and then we're good to go. So this is a really, really useful tool that we can use here, or a command that we can use. So other commands that we can use, and not all of these are going to work, but one of them is trying to dump the SAM. So we can just say something like LSA dump, and then we could say SAM like this and try to dump that. And this one doesn't work, and that's okay. Sometimes it doesn't work. We could try a SAM, we could try patch, see if that works. That doesn't work. Okay, let's try something else though. So backing up just briefly, just because we're not able to dump the SAM doesn't mean we're not able to obtain it in other ways. We can get a shell with Metasploit and dump the SAM. We can use secretsdump.py and dump the SAM. We could also just download the SAM and dump it as well. So just because Mimikatz can't do it here in this situation doesn't mean it's not something you shouldn't know. And it's also something that you should know there's alternative options that you've seen already in the course. So the big one that I really want to show you and that I'm excited about is this. It's LSA dump LSA, and then we're going to say patch like this, and watch what happens. And I should note that the patch is important. If you don't put the patch, look what happens here. So the patch allows us to actually get to the information. So here you can see the information was coming out through an error. Now here we're actually able to dump the LSA. So the LSA briefly is the Local Security Authority. So what that is a protected subsystem in Windows authentication. And it authenticates and creates logon sessions to the local computer. Well, we're on a domain controller and we're dumping the LSA here. So this is one option that we can do. Now the other option is if we want to, we can download or try to download the ntds.dit. Remember this file from a long time ago? What seems like forever ago in the course? The ntds.dit will contain all the credentials as well. But what we're looking at here is we're looking at usernames and NTLM hashes. Guess what? We could take these hashes offline and try to crack them. And we could try to crack these. And this is important. Why do we do this? There's two reasons we're doing this dump here. One is we're going to take these offline, try to crack these passwords. If we're capable of cracking these passwords, we need to know what percentage that we're capable of. Because you got to think in a real environment, we're going to dump probably hundreds of different hashes. And we're going to take those, we're going to try to crack them. And let's say we crack 10% or 30%. Well, that is a number that we can relay back to the client and say, look, your password policy is either strong or it's weak or somewhere in between, right? If we're cracking 50% of the passwords, we know that that client has a poor password policy. If we're only cracking like 1 or 2 passwords, then their password policy is pretty good. And we can kind of identify what passwords were weak and how they can improve upon it. But it gives a concrete number to the client to say, hey, look, this is how bad your password policy is or how good your password policy is. So this is one of the best practices that you will do as a penetration tester. The other thing, and what we're going to kind of lead into, and why I'm showing you Mimikatz, is we can run an attack called a golden ticket attack. And I'm going to cover that in the next video, but we need this Kerberos ticket granting ticket to be able to pull that off. So we're going to pause here. And this is really the rundown for Mimikatz. What I'm going to do when we're done with the next video is we're going to have one final video in this Active Directory section. And I'm going to provide you a bunch of resources that are very, very good for learning Active Directory. So we'll cover some of the websites and then I'll put them all down in the description below. So that way you have references for all these websites. And you can go check them out and learn more about Active Directory pen testing at a deeper level. So from here, let's go ahead and talk about golden ticket attacks, and I'll see you in the next video.